Welcome, everyone. Hi. My name is David Myers, and I'm really delighted to welcome you to today's conversation with Michael Sfard, who is a brilliant human rights lawyer, an author, a humanist, a mensch of the highest order. I, just by way of introduction, teach Jewish history at UCLA, and I'm pleased to be involved with all of the groups that are co-sponsoring today's event, beginning with Small Emuni US, Unacceptable LA, the New Israel Fund, LA Friends of Standing Together, and IAJ, which is the progressive home, the political home for progressive Israeli Americans. We're here today in the home of my dear friend Lisa and Josh Greer, and I want to thank them and Andrea Aguirre for all of the work that they have done to open their home to so many different speakers and groups on so many different occasions, all for wonderful causes, including the cause of justice and peace in Israel-Palestine. I also want to thank some of the people who made this particular event possible: Yona, Benjamin, Solomon, Michaela, Andrea, Lila, and especially Rachel Landsberg, who really labored hard to make sure that we could pull this off, this hybrid event. Many people here in LA were desperately clamoring for Michael Sfard, who also answers to Michael, to be here in Los Angeles. And alas, that is not the case yet, but we hope that we will be able to host you, Michael, here in Los Angeles and across the country to share your very important message. So I just want to give a sense of what will happen. Michael and I will speak for about 45 or 50 minutes. Then we'll have a chance for audience questions, and we hope to be concluded in about an hour and 15 minutes at the very latest. Without further ado, let me introduce Michael Sfard, who is really Israel's leading human rights lawyer, a heroic fighter for the rights of all who live in the country, an author of a number of important works, and I should show to you his most recent book called Kyibush מבית, Occupation from Within, which is characteristic of Michael. It both brings tremendous knowledge and erudition in a incredibly readable, understandable style. Those of you who are Hebrew readers should make your way to it very quickly, and we hope that it will soon appear in English. And Michael is shaking his head yes, so we'll look forward to that. So I want to begin just by way of introduction. Michael, first of all, thank you so much for being with us. It's just great to have you.
It's really great to be here, and thank you for these kind words, especially that my mother is online also, so I can't ask for more than that.
No, you can't. Maybe we'll get to the family in due course, but let's begin just by asking, how did you get to this work?
Wow. So I enlisted. So first of all, I grew up in a very political house. My parents came from Poland. They were basically deported in '68 after the student uprising and clashes there with the regime, in fights, struggles for democracy in communist Poland, also with some or quite a lot of anti-Semitism there, and so I grew up in a house that politics and democracy, human rights was an issue that was discussed constantly. And I also, when I was a teenager, I came across Shulamit Aloni, probably the most important politician Israel had in the civil rights movement. And she brought to Israel the notion of human rights as a philosophical, moral, and political concept. And that blew my mind. And it was clear to me from an early age, when I was in my senior year in school, that I would be a human rights activist. I didn't think that I'll do that work, but I thought that after hours, that's what I'm going to do. And I actually went to the Hebrew University with an intention to be enlisted to computer science. only to discover back then you didn't enroll online, you went actually to an office. And I realized that I need to put in 3 options, preferences. And I actually opened, the booklet saying which courses they have. And I thought, well, law can be interesting. And you know why? Because at that time they aired LA Law, the series. And I thought, wow, it sounds great to be a lawyer and to do all kinds of things. And eventually I put law first because, well, it doesn't matter why. I just wanted to see if I will be admitted. And I'll just end this long answer by saying that when I got back home and I told my parents that I enlisted to law as a first preference, my father, who came from Poland, said, from communist Poland, well, be careful because usually good lawyers are not decent people. So I had to both disprove that and study law. And from the first moment that I went to law school, I knew that I want to do human rights law, but I never thought that my practice as a human rights lawyer will bring me to deal with the kind of things that I am dealing with now. I had a completely different vision of what litigation what kind of litigation I'll do, but that's for later.
Tell us more about that. What was your idea, and what did it turn out to be?
Well, it was the beginning of the 90s when I started my 1990s, mind you, and the Oslo Accords were then signed, and it seemed to me that we're heading towards a very bright future, and that human rights lawyering in such a future would concentrate on things that are, the state-of-the-art questions and dilemmas of human rights, like, privacy in the age of cyber, of course, all kinds of questions that have to do with new understanding of LGBTQ rights, and all kinds of things that are, the front line of the new horizons of human rights litigation. I never thought that I would eventually litigate cases where I have to go back to the most fundamental questions of human rights and to the most basic tenets of what freedom, equality, and dignity means.
Which is to say, and we're going to touch upon this later, you didn't fully appreciate the occupation.
I was born in Jerusalem, and most of my growing up was in a neighborhood that borders East Jerusalem. I knew that there are 300,000 Jerusalemites who are not citizens of Israel, who are Palestinians, but I didn't really understand that. I didn't really know that. I grew up in a city where almost 40% of it are Palestinians, and my third language at school, apart from English, was French. No one taught me Arabic. No one thought that I should learn Arabic. So I knew that there is an occupation, but until I started my internship with a very renowned Israeli civil rights lawyer, Avigdor Feldman, where I, for the first time, traveled as a lawyer to the West Bank, where I first heard the stories of our clients back then. It only then dawned on me that the biggest fight for human rights is the fight to end the occupation.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to talk about that, but I have to just delve into one more family matter. It's something we've talked about. You are the son and grandson of academics, and your grandfather happens to have been one of the most important social theorists of the late 20th, early 21st century, the Polish-Jewish sociologist Zygmunt Bauman. And what Bauman was known for, amongst other things, was his very deep critique of modernity, the idea of modernity, right, as the source of light and goodness and justice. He, along with Arendt and Horkheimer and Adorno, argued that modernity was, in fact, the source of and a generator of some of the most terrible features of modern life, like totalitarianism. Perhaps his most famous account of that is in his book, Modernity and the Holocaust, in which he
That's
sees the Holocaust not as an aberration, but as continuous with and indeed a product of modernity. And I'm wondering if what in what sense are you your grandfather's grandson?
Oh, I think in many things. I hope in many things. First of all, I had the privilege of meeting him and talking to him a lot, and he definitely influenced the way I look at things and the kind of critical methodology that I have. Um, Not only in questions that have to do with modernity and postmodernity, but also and you know and narratives and all these things, but also when it comes to questions of class, of power, centers of power, and how they conduct themselves, and how those who are disenfranchised of power operate and being operated on. So absolutely. I also think that his criticism of Israel was provided me, together with my parents, the think allowed me to go on my route of criticizing the country and the society I live in without feeling that this is betrayal, that this is something that should not be done. So absolutely, yes, this is definitely one of the things that influenced very much my life, my grandfather's philosophy and his politics.
So one final question, I promise, on you and where you come from, and then we'll jump into.
We didn't discuss the fact, you didn't say that we're going to talk about me. We were talking about Gaza and the West Bank.
Yeah. Right. Enough of talk of this. Enough of the talk about your work. Let's talk about you. Yeah. Um, you know, one of the main sponsors for today's event is the Smol Amoni organization, which you know well. A good number of the people in this room and on Zoom are themselves observant Jews. We've never actually discussed this directly, but I'm curious to what extent you see your work as a function of Jewishness in any way. We talked about more universal values, but the impulse of tzedek, tzedek tadov, of pursuit of justice. Is there any part of your sense of Jewishness that you think is an animating force in your life work?
A huge amount. And I think people who read my texts would find a lot of the sources for my moral philosophy and the sources for my politics come from the Jewish experience, from the Jewish history, from Jewish wisdom. You know, we didn't plan to talk about this, but for example, I'm going to publish a new piece shortly that deals with my grief with what happened to the Hebrew language, the language of the in which the world by which the world was created, the language that allowed me to defend God's creatures and allows me until this day, the language that introduced all these universal values that you mentioned before has been used in the last decades, but mainly in the last 2 years, to issue commands of starvation, of annihilation, to create a vocabulary of racism, of Jewish superiority. And I have this, you know, a romance with the Hebrew language that comes from my ability to read even the Bible in its original version, understanding things that those who do not understand Hebrew would not be able to understand, because Hebrew is one of the only languages where people in modern times can understand fairly well the antique version of it, because it was frozen for so long. So a lot of what I do and a lot of the structure of moral philosophy that I apply has to do with my Jewish upbringing and my identity as a Jew.
Yeah, I just have to say that's such an incredibly powerful point. You have in the room and online many lovers of the Hebrew language, and I must say that when I think of the collapse of values, I tend to focus on the political and the moral, and often see Hebrew language as a kind of safe refuge or bastion of those values. But it's at the same time a reflection of that collapse of political and moral values. And it's interesting how we
It,
have different takes on it. I sort of look to it, Hebrew, as a kind of retreat from, insofar as I'm not exposed as you are to the
that's
everydayness.
why. So I just want to say,
You have that
David,
more romantic diasporist view on Hebrew, as you know, as you have read in my appreciation for Rabbi Dovich, also
yes,
an
yes.
Hebraist. So it's very interesting to put on the table that juxtaposition, whereby
No, so
Hebrew is implicit.
I just want to say, I sit in cafes in Tel Aviv, and Hebrew was contaminated. And one of my struggles is to purify it, to clean it, to cleanse it.
Right. Well, the place where we meet, Michael, is Tolat Sfarim
Yeah.
the center of Tel Aviv. And what is important to share with the audience is that when I'm there with you, you are recognized by many people. And many people come to express their thanks to you, even though you told me you have not been invited once to be a commentator on Israeli television since October 7th. Since October 7th, a very striking omission.
Yeah, I was a frequent interviewee and commentator. Not very, but from time to time, because I have expertise on a certain matter. And since October 7th, it's not me, it's not about me, it's about the fact that the Israeli media has betrayed the two callings that it has. I mean, like every journalistic enterprise, their callings is to provide the public with credible and accurate information. That's one. And second, to allow a stage for the variety of positions to be presented through their studios. And in both categories, the Israeli media, the Israeli mainstream media, almost all of it has censored itself and banned Israelis from information, from the flow of information on the plight and the suffering of Gazans for 2 years. For 2 years, we haven't seen on Israeli mainstream media anything about that, and the complete denial of voices like mine. And I'll give you another example. Gideon Levy, I'm sure many of you know who Gideon Levy is, was a permanent member of a panel in one of the talk shows on Israeli television. And immediately, or very very shortly after October 7th, he was dismissed of that panel. So yeah, the media would not.
Right. I was reading this just yesterday in Kibbush Mibait, which is your book, about the importance of the media as an accomplice, in some sense, in societal ills verging onto crimes. And you cite one of the reports on sort of the scars of apartheid presented in Nelson Mandela, in which South African media is really indicted as a key accomplice in perpetuating apartheid, the system of injustice.
Yeah, I think there are many parallels, and not only from October 7th. When we're talking about the occupation, apartheid, the Israeli domination, disinheritance, oppression of millions of Palestinians for generations, the role of the media is very similar to the one in South African apartheid, because the media in Israel is free. It is a free media. There is freedom of press in Israel. I mean, there's a lot of pressure, and freedom of the press is being challenged, but also in America. But the media knows how to be in opposition, and it has been in opposition to Netanyahu, definitely a very fierce opposition. What it hasn't provided, even slightly, is a criticism of the underlying assumptions under which Israelis live when it comes to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And And the fact that the Israeli media, again, the mainstream media, of course, we have other media, I mean, Haaretz and Local Call, and we do have some very good outlets which do provide all this. But the mainstream media and the big television news channels do not provide any stage to those voices that talk about the occupation as an abhorrent crime that we have to end, and to those voices who do not subscribe to the notion that the IDF is the most moral army in the world, and to those voices who warn against Jewish supremacy. I mean, these are things that were completely and are completely absent of the Israeli media. So yeah, they are providing a big fight to Netanyahu when it comes to the judicial overhaul and for other, the trials and corruption and things like that. But so did the South African mainstream media during the apartheid days. Only when it came to apartheid, they didn't provide any alternative. And I think in that sense, there is a parallel here. During the Gaza war, this trend became a really vicious crime.
Okay, let's turn our attention to Gaza. There's currently a ceasefire orchestrated by none other than Donald Trump and his son-in-law and good friend and business partner. The living Israeli hostages have been returned. We are waiting for the return of all of the deceased Israeli hostages. There's a very fragile ceasefire at work in Gaza itself. How do you assess where we are the day after, as it were, 2 weeks after the ceasefire has taken place? What's in your mind as a human rights lawyer?
First of all, I'm overjoyed that there is a ceasefire. I'm overjoyed that the living hostages have returned. And I think nothing good or any good scenario had to start with this. So I'm really happy. It's not happy. Happy is not the word. People here, it's almost an overused saying that we began breathing again. It was as if we're being suffocated for the last 2 years, and now suddenly we have some breeze of oxygen. So yeah, again, happy is not. I am happy that the hostages return, and I am happy that we don't hear of 3-digit number of Palestinians being killed every day. This is extremely important. However, we have to acknowledge that this ceasefire and this agreement, I don't know if to call it agreement usually has several sides, and here we have a deal rather than an agreement, a deal between the American president and some Arab and Muslim countries who are very smart to somehow hug him and create interest for America and for his family in them. So I am suspicious, and I'm suspicious because when this positive outcome has not come on the basis of values, but rather of political and economic interests, I fear from the way it will be played out in the future. And we already see, I mean, the agreement itself has some traits that makes it clear that this is going to the wrong direction. In order for Gaza to be rehabilitated, it's not enough to reconstruct it. It's not enough to have bulldozers that will take away the ruins and the rubble and will build new infrastructure and new houses. In order for Gaza to be healed or to be start the long, long process of healing and rehabilitation, Gazans need reconstruction, independence, and accountability or justice of some sort. Without all these three, and recognition of what they went through, which is part of justice. Without all these three, there is no healing. By the way, also for Israelis, for the crimes of October 7th. But we do have independence, and we do have freedom. So we need justice, and we need reconstruction of the ruined communities. Now, the deal that brought about the ceasefire was a deal that was done without any involvement of Palestinian delegates. And still, Palestinians are not involved in the decision-making of their future. So we're seeing a stretch of land that is under occupation. It has been under occupation even before October 7th. It is still under occupation. Maybe the occupation now will involve more powers than just Israel, but it is under occupation, and it has been for generations. And that has to end. And without ending that, we will not have we will not start the road to a healthy Gazan society. Accountability, without justice. By the way, justice is an accountability. It's not only about bringing those who committed crimes to justice. That's one facet of justice. But recognition and reparations and all kinds of other ways of justice, or means of justice, are needed. And I today, before starting this conversation, I read something about the situation now in Darfur. 20 years ago, there was a genocide in Darfur, or a mass killing that was considered by many as a genocide. And the International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants and indicted Omar al-Bashir, the president of Southern Sudan. And he was not extradited to the court, and he was allowed to continue his life, even as a leader. Now he's no longer the leader, but he's not being extradited even when he travels. And you know what? Darfur is back in the turmoil and of atrocities, of mass killings, of mass rapes. Now, I'm not sure, and I can't be sure, that if Omar al-Bashir and his cronies would be put to justice and were now in prison, the future would have been different. But there is definitely higher chance that it would have, because without accountability, the chances of history, of atrocities to repeat themselves is higher. So without accountability and justice, Gaza cannot heal. Without independence and Palestinian agency, it cannot heal. And that is why, while I'm happy that there is a ceasefire, that an extremely, I cannot even start to describe how important it was for everyone in this region that the ceasefire came into place, and that it is being kept fiercely by the American administration. That is only a first step. The next steps seem bleaker and very risky.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I mean, there's so much to dig into, but I do want to just, in some sense, unpack the three steps that you talked about. Maybe I'll begin with the last, accountability, which often reads as a call for some form of retributive justice. Those who were guilty of crimes should be brought to trial and punished for their actions. And you said that's not the only form of accountability, but a lot of attention often focuses on that. And I'm quite persuaded by the argument of the father of the soon-to-be mayor of New York, which is to say the theorist Mahmoud Mamdani, who is actually a very fierce critic of the model of retributive justice at the expense of new political arrangements that will allow for, say, a prevention of the recurrence of mass murder or genocide. What was missing in Darfur was not just that al-Bashir didn't make his way to The Hague, but the absence of any political framework that would make for a sustainable future. So just, I mean, I want to hear your thoughts about what you think. Who are the various actors who need to act in order to set in place these steps? Reconstruction, the need seems to be immediate. Maybe it's intermediate, it's immediate, intermediate, and longer term strategies. I don't know how you see the sequencing, but who needs to do what? And here are some of the actors: Israel, the Palestinians, Hamas, the PA, other bodies, the Arab neighbors, the United States, and then the international legal regime. Where do you think, who needs to do what, in what order do you think, to move to a more viable Gaza?
Look, you mentioned several actors, but they're not of the same strength. I can write a very long book on what the Palestinian Authority should do, or Palestine, the state of Palestine should do. But they have absolutely no power. Absolutely. They are extremely, extremely weak. And of course, the most powerful actor is America, is the United States. And so the degree of responsibility is in direct correlation to the power you have. So the biggest responsibility is vested with America and Israel. These are the two main powers that have influence over what's going on in this region. And my opinion is almost naive. I think we have one normative system of norms that should guide us, and that's international law. And I'm not saying it because I am fond of a specific norm in international law. I am fond of many, but it's not the issue. The issue is that we, as a race, the human race, we, the humanity, have learned from our thousands of years of experience of wars and conflicts and displacement and genocides. All of this, we learned from it. And the lessons we learned were eventually consolidated and furnished international law. International law is the set of norms that we have created in order to guide us on how we should live our lives in the globalized world and how we should solve our conflicts. And after the Second World War, and after the Holocaust, and all the other atrocities that occurred in the Second World War, again, we, the international community, gathered. And by the way, I have to say that I wrote it in the book. I was amazed to discover in my research that the San Francisco conference, in which the United Nations Charter was written, convened in June of 1945. Less than 2 months after the worst war the world has ever endured ended, after 70 million people have perished and Europe was in ruins. Less than 2 months later, the conference that in which the UN Charter was written convened and wrote the most optimistic document I've ever seen, that enshrines human rights as a guiding principle and provides the international community with a new concept that was never before, that use of force in international relations is unlawful except in self-defense, which for all of us who are creatures of post-Second World War is obvious. Just like it's obvious thou shalt not steal. We are all used to it. But if I would have this conversation with a crowd 100 years ago, that would not be obvious. And just like powers have the right to use their economic power and cultural power and political power to pursue their interests, military power was another tool in their toolkit. So we have international law, and what we're seeing now, and I'm getting back to the question you asked me. I'm sorry, I've done a little detour. We are now witnessing, not only in Gaza, we're witnessing a huge attack on the basic fundamental principles of international law. And if international law will collapse, then we will be back in times where there were not of lawlessness. And we don't want that. So my answer is all these powers, Israel, Palestine, the Arabs, the US, the international community, the EU, they all have to follow international law. What does that mean? It means that we have to pursue Palestinian independence. We have to pursue Palestinian freedom. They have to be masters of their fate. They have to have what the Jewish people aspired for so long, and that is political self-determination. And in order for that to happen, they need to have agency in the pre-state stage. Now, when things are being discussed, they have to be a major actor in the negotiations on how we go forward. And we have to allow them a space. Now, who are they? I'm not the one deciding. It's the Palestinian people who should decide, and Israel has done everything it can to prevent Palestinian elections since 2006. Now, I'm not sure the Palestinian Authority was not happy with it, but that's not my business. Palestinians need to have their elected representatives, and these representatives have to be involved in all the decision-making regarding their future, just like we have ours.
Yeah. So you've foregrounded the importance of self-determination as a key feature of the international legal order. I want to go back to Gaza and ask about two other important terms or possible procedures rooted in international law. And they're the most challenging of all. The first is, do you believe that what transpired in Gaza after October 7th was a genocide? Simple question.
Just one more question.
October 7th was a genocide. And second, if we were to take international law seriously, do you think that means that we need to support and pursue the indictments issued by the International Criminal Court against Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant, as well as the four now deceased Hamas leaders? Like, are these measures by which we need to accountability and take international law seriously?
I'll start with the second question, easier. Absolutely, yes. The International Criminal Court has issued, it's a serious institution, very professional. It issued arrest warrants, not for genocide, for the crimes against humanity of extermination, which is basically mass killing. It's a brother of genocide, but a younger brother, smaller, and the war crime of employing starvation as a method of war. And since I know very well and very intimately and very well the Israeli legal system, and I know that there is no chance that the Israeli legal system will seriously deal with such allegations, I'm afraid that there is no complementarity, so there is no way to divert the cases to Israel in a way that will be meaningful. And so if we are serious about the importance of accountability and bringing people who are responsible for international crimes to justice, then this is the way we, again, as an international community, have chosen, and we have to abide to it. We have to abide to it. We cannot applaud the ICC when it issues arrest warrants against Putin, Vladimir Putin, and then say something completely different when it comes to Benjamin Netanyahu. And it is And by the way, this is an existential issue for that institution. That institution will cease to exist, if the developing world, those who are not aligned with the West, will feel that they are the only ones who are being tried in The Hague.
And as it is, it's something like 90% of those indicted or brought to justice by the ICC come from black Arabs.
Yeah, exactly. And so the suspicion is, and I understand them, is that once again the white man is trying to educate the brown and the black man. So that's the answer to your second question. As for your first question, and I have to say, it will not do justice for me to answer try to answer in a short way, because this is a very, very complex and profound issue. Genocide has different meanings in different disciplines. Okay, it has similar but different in history, in political science, in law, and it has different meanings in different definitions of it. The Polish Jewish jurist who coined the term genocide, Raphael Lemkin, while he was fleeing from the Nazis from his hometown of Lvov, back then in Poland, now in Ukraine, his image of what genocide is and why we should not just outlaw it, but prosecute people who are involved in genocide, was that genocide is like eliminating one human group or several human groups. It's narrowing down the variety of human groups that are there in the world. And that can be done in different ways. It can be done by killing them all. That's a physical annihilation. But it can be done in a combination of killing them and destroying their cultural assets, taking away their leaders, erasing them politically, and so on. So, I'm asking sometimes my students whether if all the Jews will be coerced to convert until the very last of them, is that genocide? According to Lemkin, it is. If there are no more Jews in the world because of this enterprise, you don't have to actually physically kill them all in order to kill them. Now, when Lemkin tried to convince the UN to open for signature a international convention on prevention and of the crime of apartheid, the problem was that colonial powers or those who were in the past colonial powers were afraid that every colonial enterprise would be seen as a genocidal enterprise. And the Russians, or the Soviets back then, were afraid that their fight against their dissidents as a political group, because there can be an ethnic, religious, racial group, but also a political group that can be a subject of genocide, would be seen as a genocide. So eventually, the definition that was adopted was a very narrow definition of the notion of genocide, and it only accepted the physical or biological annihilation. So killing them all, or biologically creating a situation in which they cannot breed. Okay, so this, and then international courts have narrowed this even more by interpreting the requisition, the demand, that genocide can only happen if the person that commits the genocide has an intention to destroy physically or biologically the whole group.
Or in part.
Or in part, but the distinct part. So we're talking about Gaza. Anyway, we're not talking about all the Palestinians in the world. We're talking about the Palestinians of Gaza as a group in which we're asking ourselves, was there a genocide committed against them? So the international courts have narrowed it down even more, saying, if in order to prove this special intent to destroy them all, usually in criminal law, we say people mean to achieve the natural outcome of their deeds. I don't need to hear him say, I meant to kill the guy. You pointed a gun to his head and you pushed the trigger. We assume that you intended to kill him, right? But in this case, the courts have ruled that in order to prove genocide, because it's such a
ultimate crime, the crime
ultimate crime of crimes, the only reasonable explanation for your deeds, the only reasonable, not the most reasonable, the only reasonable explanation must be the genocidal intent. So I end this short, quick trip in the roads of the legal term of genocide by saying the following. I believe and I think that if Lemkin would be alive today, he would say that Israel has been committing the crime of genocide against the Gazan people. When you
that more expansive definition,
the more expensive definition, when you completely annihilate their education infrastructure, when you shred to pieces their health system, when you demolish all their religious sacred places, when you uproot 95% of them and move them around, when you starve them, when you do all of these things, when you kill dozens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, we'll see to what a number will eventually reach. When you do all of these things, then it is a concentrated effort to eliminate that group. And even if the Israeli leaders would say, it's okay, these people can live on, but not in Gaza, they can leave, that's still eliminating, destroying that group, because that group would not be the Gazan Palestinian group when that happens. So I think that when it comes to the moral question of genocide, I think we are responsible for it. Now, do I think that South Africa will be able, in the very narrow and very high standards of proof that are needed, as I described, to win the case on genocide? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Because, for example, Israel can say, let's talk about starvation. What was the intention in the campaign to starve Gazans? Was it to destroy the group, the 2 million Gazans that live in Gaza, to have them all die of hunger? Or was it to put pressure on Hamas to release the hostages and to surrender? Now, both explanations are criminal. Both explanations are criminal. The second explanation means that Israel was using starvation of civilians as a method of war. This is unlawful. It's a horrendous crime, but it's not genocide. And if Israel would say that in court, and Israel has a problem because the alibis to genocide are other crimes. So, but if it would say that, then if the court would stick with the precedent that I described before, then it's not, the question is not whether this explanation of the motivation behind the starvation campaign is more reasonable than the genocidal explanation, but rather, is there another reasonable explanation? And if there is one, then genocide has not been proven. Now, I'll just end with saying, because I'm a lawyer and it's important to paint the whole picture, there are two cases, one regarding Myanmar in the International Court of Justice, and one, the South African case against Israel, in which those standards, those very high standards, are also being challenged. And it might be that the court would change its past precedents and lower the bar and say, well, you don't have to be the only, it doesn't have to be the only reasonable explanation. It has to be the most reasonable explanation in order to, that would be a change. But as the president go now, it's a tough case.
Okay, I do in a minute want to turn to the West Bank just for the last 7 to 10 minutes. But before I feel I have to ask, and how should one regard October 7th itself, according to the standards of international law?
So there is a question of whether we can see. Look, I think we have much more evidence on intention when it comes to the Israeli warfare in Gaza, because our politicians and our generals were speaking constantly and saying stupid stuff constantly and horrendous stuff constantly. And we have little of this from Hamas, but what we have is from things that the IDF has seized in the tunnels. And from what I saw, there was an intention there to destroy the communities surrounding Gaza, the Jewish communities, the Israeli communities surrounding Gaza. Now, there is a legal question whether the Israeli community surrounding Gaza could be seen as part of a group. I think it can. I think it can be seen as a part of a group. And so it can be a subject of a genocidal effort. And then the question is, was there an intention to destroy them? And again, I think when it comes to the Lemkin definition, absolutely yes. There's no question about it. They wanted to burn it all. They wanted to destroy the communities. The communities would not, if according to their mission, the communities, if the mission is successful, the communities would no longer were ceased to be. When it comes to the more narrow definition of physical annihilation of people, of the whole of all of the people, I don't think that I have enough evidence yet to see what were the orders that were given.
Thank you. So,
but David, I just want to say that in the first days after October 7th, I have even, it was long time before anyone said anything about genocide in the context of alleging it against Israel. But in the days after October 7th, I have, for the first time in my life, raised the issue, the notion of genocide as something that has to be looked into regarding the crimes of Hamas and the other armed groups that committed the crimes in the Gaza envelope.
Okay. So in the last segment, say the last 7 minutes or so before we open up for questions, I want to turn our attention to the West Bank. So as the hell of Gaza was unfolding before our eyes, less visible certainly to the international community was what was going on in the West Bank, which was a total degeneration and deterioration of any existing legal or seemingly political framework. I kind of think of it as what was unfolding under the cover of war, in the fog of war, was a case of state-sponsored lawlessness, which is a kind of juxtaposition and it was kind of a paradoxical formulation. But you had kind of the lawlessness of cohorts of settlers, but with the seeming backing or the tacit approval of state actors. I'm wondering, how do you see it? Does that sound right, or how would you formulate what was going on, what has been going on over the last 2 years, and of course for much longer?
So just a moment before I answer this, I just want to say, because we talked about genocide in a technical way, and I just want to say, I bought the book written by Raphael Lemkin many years ago. I put it on my shelf in my office. It was never meant to be a book that would be relevant to my work. And the fact that we're even talking about the question of genocide in the context of what my country, my society has been doing in the last 2 years is crushing me. It's whenever I think about it, I can't believe that we got to this. And now to the West Bank.
I just have to say, it's interesting and totally natural for you to arrive at that decision. What you gave voice to in this book was your profound sense of disappointment on the part of progressives the world over for either not condemning or even celebrating October 7th. Something you very powerfully articulated here, kind of surprising me in all honesty. And yet we're in a very different place now. I just want to register that you're in a very different place now because of all that has transpired.
I am in a very different place, but I'm not taking back anything that I said about those people who thought that they are very progressives by basically celebrating terrorism. And I'm the last person to not understand how important, how vicious the Israeli occupation and the blockade on Gaza was. But the October 7th atrocities have been atrocities and were waged against civil. Well, I don't need to say that in this crowd. Anyway, look, I've been representing Palestinian individuals and families and communities in the West Bank and East Jerusalem for the last 3 decades. And there was never anything even close, remotely close, to what we're seeing in the last 2 years. And for me, as a lawyer whose tools are, the law and legal advisors on the other side, who I hope speak the same language in the sense of law, who share at least rhetorically the same values. And by the way, rhetoric is important here. For me, it was a shock to see not only how the state has not only allowed and not only incentivized, but also aided and abetted the gangs, the Ku Klux Klan style gangs of violent settlers to raid Palestinian, the most vulnerable, the most weakened Palestinian small communities, first in remote areas, in order to ethnically cleanse the open spaces of the West Bank. It was done very strategically. I mean, it looks like something that is completely done in a beast-like way, but there is there is a plan here. And so the Jordan Valley, South Mount Hebron, and the Jerusalem envelope, all these areas where you have very small and very weak communities of either herders or Bedouins in communities of 2 or 3 families. They were the ones that were the first victims, and they were displaced so quickly. According to the B'Tselem figures, about between 60 and 70 communities have been displaced entirely. And there are about a dozen more that have been displaced partially, with the government providing the tools, the cars, and the guns, because many of those violent settlers were drafted on October 7th or immediately after, and were provided with guns and with uniform. So I had clients telling me, we were fighting to get restraining orders against this very violent settler who comes daily to harass our children and to break our windows and to beat us. And now he came with a gun that was provided by the army and with uniform. And now he's the law. And we've seen that all around. And it is still ongoing. And what we've also seen, which is very disturbing, is that the law enforcement authorities, the military and the police, have stopped obeying to Israeli court orders. I'll repeat that because you might think that you didn't hear well. I have cases in which we have court orders. The court orders, for example, last week, my office has managed to get, on behalf of Peace Now and a very bold, very brave community in South Mount Hebron, El Khair, an order against the nearby settlement of Carmel, who built illegally a new neighborhood on their houses to stop the construction and to prevent any moving into their houses. We got an order from the court, and that order was violated by the settlers. And I spent a whole day, all the Erev Sukkot, all the Erev Simchat Torah, I spent in trying to get, in talking, not trying to get, I did get, with the police, with the army, with the civil administration, with the Ministry of Defense. I talked to all of them, and they did nothing. Absolutely nothing. And until this moment, there's still construction over there. And the same goes to the restraining orders that we managed to get against these sheriffs, 3 or 4 cases in which we've been very successful in getting restraining orders. And the police just doesn't care, doesn't give a damn. I began telling my clients and my associates in the office that winning in court became the easy part. The difficult part is to actually implement it. And all of it has one source, that this current government is applying the meta philosophy of Jewish superiority. That's the thing. Jewish superiority is the name of the game in between, I hope you don't mind me saying, between the river and the sea. And in the West Bank, it is seen in its most vicious and monstrous fashion, that Palestinians are subjected to the law, and the law is draconian. It's a military law. It's not a rule of law, but rule by law, a law that is meant to suppress and to oppress and to make sure that the subjects are behaving the way the regime wants. And the Jews are completely spared the law.
So, Michael, I just have to jump in because I'm going to ask one final question, then we're going to open up. And yet, part of what you argue is the occupation, of course, was not born on 7 October 2023. There's a very long history. And the occupation has had an extraordinarily corrosive effect on democratic institutions in Israel, within the Green Line, not just in the West Bank, such that one has to understand the ההפיכה, the judicial coup, as an outgrowth of the occupation. And this may help explain why, it's curious to note that demonstrators against the attempted judicial coup, for the most part, did not engage the occupation as all as a central concern. So it's all ongoing, part of something that began much earlier. And yet, I guess you're arguing there's an intensification in this new unvarnished ideology of Jewish supremacy that has emerged in the Netanyahu era. But maybe you could just kind of briefly lay out the longer history in which this piece is now so firmly embedded, and then we'll open up for questions.
Yeah, I mean, this is why I wrote the book. So it's a book. It's not a long book. It's a very short book, but it's a book. So I can't
buy this book.
So I can't. By the way, one of the protagonists of this book I saw in one of that is here, Kathleen Paratis, who is a good friend and an amazing lawyer, a human rights lawyer. And and she's in the book and it has a very important role there. But look, it is impossible, as I write in the book, to have democracy on Mondays and Thursdays. Democracy is a holistic thing. You cannot have democracy and then have a backyard in which you exercise totalitarianism or military rule. It just doesn't work that way, because this backyard keeps on creeping inside. It's like a poison that is dripping into your veins constantly. You get accustomed to how you get things done. in this backyard. And when times are easy, that's no problem. You can make the distinction. But when times are tough, you ask yourself, why do I need all this, separation of powers and an activist court that keeps on intervening? Why? I can do stuff like I do there. There it's very efficient. And it's not by chance that the judicial overhaul or the constitutional coup is made in the settlements. It has, the people didn't see, but it's written in very small letters on the rear side of it. It's made in Kiryat Arba, Kdumim, and Pnei Hever. That's where Ben Gvir and Smotrich and Rotman live. They don't live in Israel. They live there, where they are superior by definition in law, where they have their own law and their neighbors a different law. So it's not by chance that they brought these ideas and said, well, if we want to have an annexation and in a formal apartheid between the river and the sea, and if we want to grab more land, we can't have this Supreme Court that slows us down. By the way, the court never stopped them. It only slowed them down. But the current generation of the settlement movement leadership is not conservative as the previous one. The previous ones were really conservative. They believed in gradual change. In Am Yisrael, lo mefached miderech aruka, is not afraid of a long road. No, these are the ones of Gush Emunim. But the current leadership, the Smotriches and the Ben Gvirs, are revolutionary. They want everything now. And when you want everything now, the court is like like a stone in the shoe for someone who wants to run a sprint. So they need to move that away. And they had a timing from heaven, because suddenly the prime minister had become completely dependent on them because of his corruption charges. And three groups in the Israeli society had similar interests to crush the judiciary. The settlers, for the reasons I mentioned, the Bibyists, because of his trial and because of corruption, because they wanted to nominate their friends to every public position, and they couldn't in the Israeli legal environment, modern legal environment, and the ultra-Orthodox, who have a problem that they cannot get exempted from military service in a system that appreciates at least equality between Jews. So all these three came together, but the engine, the wisdom, the devilish cleverness is with the settlement movement.
Okay, I think we're going to pause here. We have a little less than 15 minutes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask that we'll take 3 questions at a time, and we'll see if we can get to 2 rounds of 3 questions. So we're going to alternate a question here, one, and then a question online, which I will read, and then Chaim, and then we'll see if we get to a second round. So Nomi, go ahead. There's some familiar preference given here. My wife Nomi is the first question.
Thank you so much. You were so trenchant. And where do you want me to stand?
Closer.
Oh, okay. I'm in close. Should I?
Yeah, why not?
Here?
You may as well.
Okay, questioners here. Thank you, first of all, for being so trenchant and inspiring. I'm sure I speak for all of us when I say how deeply appreciative I am. I have a 2-part question about the allegations that Hamas and or the Palestinians who followed Hamas on October 7th into Israel committed mass rape. So the first question is there evidence that clearly supports or refutes the claim of mass rape? And the second part is, if there is evidence, when did it emerge? That is to say, can you help us evaluate the claim that people who doubted it were engaged in just, reprehensible rape denialism, or was there legitimate reason for doubt?
Okay, that's question number one. I'm now going to ask the first question that came from online, Rabbi David Cooper. Thinking of your grandfather's understanding that the Holocaust was not an aberration of modernity, are the occupation and the destruction of Gaza not aberrations of Zionism, but its logical outcome? Okay? Right.
It's the logical level. Okay. So I stand up.
If you can, yeah. It might be easy.
I think I can stand.
Good.
Thank you so much as well. I have a two-part question, as we always do. Number one, I wanted to ask you about the issue of just war, what your thoughts are, because the response immediately to October 7th was that Israel had a right and even an obligation, as some people spoke about. And the more I thought about it, the more damaging I thought this whole notion of just war is. And that really on a philosophic level, there is no such thing as a just war. There are necessary wars, but not just wars. And I'd like a legal opinion, some sort of legal discussion. And the second thing is also a far-reaching question, and that is, can Israel survive all of this as a democracy, or as something that we recognize to be something that we're familiar with as a Jewish people?
Okay.
What's going to happen?
Great. So those are some minor questions. And I'm going to add just one more to get more into, so we'll hear more voices. This is from Eitan from Newton, Massachusetts. Given your experience defending human rights within the Israeli legal system, how do you see the role of Israeli and diaspora Jews who care deeply about Israel's security, but also about ending the occupation and preserving Israel's democratic character? So Israeli Jews and diaspora Jews, what should we be doing? So there's a lot on the table. I don't know that we're going to be able to have a second round, but we'll try our best, Michael. If anybody can do it, it's you. Unmute yourself. Yep.
Yeah, I won't be silenced. I do apologize for being short, but unfortunately we don't have much time. So Naomi, as for the question of evidence of mass rape, the question is not whether there is evidence, but how strong is the evidence? Because yes, there were accounts and there were testimonies of rape. I don't know if mass rape, I don't know, but there were evidence of rape and other forms of sexual violence. By the way, there's probably no war without sexual violence, and this is part of. But I don't know how strong these evidence are, because Israel has not. Look, we're 2 years after October 7th, and Israel has not indicted even one person for what has happened on October 7th. This is an amazing thing. And the reason is that Israel is toying with creating a Guantanamo-style courts, which would be kangaroo courts. This would be the opposite of bringing justice for the victims of October 7th. So they are keeping to themselves the evidence, and so I cannot say. I wrote in the book there was rape and there was sexual violence because I think there was, but whether it was mass sexual violence, was it systematic, then I cannot answer that question. I don't know. Is the occupation, apartheid, etc., an aberration of Zionism? I should again direct you to my book, which asks this question, and I don't want to spoil for those who will read, but I nevertheless will. It's a very, very difficult question to answer, because my starting point is that I don't think there is anything there's nothing, there's no default that a Jewish desire for self-determination will end up in a racist or an apartheid regime or in committing crimes. I think the question is less the desire to have a Jewish self-determination, but more of the question of exclusivity in this land. And Zionism had different streams. And in the book, I delve into this, and I have a sentence there where I say that I'm afraid that the direction Zionism took was crystallized, was frozen, was decided on the trains to Auschwitz. When Jews were transported to death camps by their millions, something in our collective understanding of the world has deeply changed. And I think we have adopted the philosophical and political vision that says there are only two statuses in the world. You can be either victims or victimizers. And we've been victims and we don't like it. And so we prefer to be victimizers. And that's what we've been doing since 1948. We don't have an alternative reality in which the Holocaust didn't happen to verify whether my theory is correct or not, which makes it a splendid theory that cannot be refuted. But that's how I see things. I think that that there's nothing inherent. That's the word I was looking for before. There's nothing inherent in the desire for Jewish nation state that makes it a road that leads to occupation and apartheid and maybe genocide. I think there's something about the history of the Jewish people and the Zionist movement that led to it. Just wars. Yes, I don't like this. I don't like this concept too. International law doesn't have the concept of just war. It has a concept of legal use of force. And on October 7th, Israel was completely justified. And yes, I think it had the right and the obligation to use force. Let's not forget that on October 7th, for the first time since 1948, Israeli communities were under occupation. So of course Israel had the right to strike back and to push the invaders away and to pursue a reality in which those communities would not be in danger of going through October 7th once again. So the question is not of a just war, but of the right to use force and the legality of the use of force. And then, of course, the question is what kind of force is permissible? Not every force is permissible. We decided, again, as an international community, that not everything is allowed in war. That's a basic decision, a choice we made, that laws are governed by law and not completely a lawless event. Can Israel survive all of this? Wow, I wish I had the answer to that. I don't have the answer to that. I think there is a lot of factors that will influence this question, including the answer to the following question, which is the role of the Jewish diaspora. I think what I came to grips with is that, when I was 20, I thought we Israeli opposition, we Israeli dissenting voices, we will win this struggle within the Israeli society. We don't need pressure from outside. We will do it by ourselves. So I was 20, I was young, I had a lot of stamina, and I was stupid as well. And I didn't see how difficult it would be for the Israeli society to find the power, the forces in itself to do the right thing. And I later became 30 and 40, and I thought that everything will be solved if only we had pressure from outside, if only we had an American president, maybe Barack Obama, maybe someone else who would say to Israel, enough is enough, and two-state will emerge, and maybe a confederation between them, and a binational court of human rights that would deal with the questions between the two states and the minorities within the states. And now I'm 50, and I know that this is also not the correct answer. And now I think, maybe I'll change my mind when I'm 60, that it will be a combination. It will be a combination between pressure from within and pressure from outside. And pressure from outside elevates, inflates, and empowers the pressure from inside. Our community of human rights activists, of peace activists, of progressive Israelis, we're a small minority in Israel, but not an insignificant one. And the more there's pressure on Israel from outside, the more Jewish communities, our diaspora, we are a nation state, and Jewish communities are important to the state of Israel, just like Palestinian communities in the diaspora are important for the future Palestinian state or the current Palestinian state. And so what you do and what you say and how you empower us is extremely important from inside. And I think, and maybe we're getting to the end, so I want to say that if there's something that I see a little ray of light in all of this darkness, is I see the growth of an international civil society that puts this issue in its top on the top of its agenda. Yes, there are also anti-Semites out there. Yes, there are those who abuse and exploit the just fight for Palestinian freedom in order to incite against Jews. But the vast majority of those who are fighting for Palestinian independence are not anti-Semites. And I think that the international civil society has proved in the past that when something is in the top of their agenda, it creates political changes. When it comes to the climate, nothing would have happened. Not that enough has happened, but nothing would have happened without the international civil society. The fight to end apartheid in South Africa would have not been possible, and the Western powers would have not been putting sanctions on South Africa if not for the rallies and the massive demonstrations in Western capitals. And I can speak about the nuclear disarmament and all kinds of things that politicians and leaders of their own accord would not pursue. It's only when they are pressured to do this by the civil society. And what we're seeing now is that this issue is an important issue, and the political translation of it will come a bit later, but it will come. And that's what we need you. We need you in order to pivot this, to fine-tune this in a way that that would be good for all the people that live in our region.
Well, Michael, that is the place to stop. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
First of all, thank you so much for making time, especially as we discussed at this moment of precious family time. You've carved out an hour and 15 minutes to be with us, and we're deeply appreciative of that. But even beyond that, for all that you do for the causes that many of us hold so dear, you're a hero to us. You're a friend to many, and we are here to provide whatever chizuk, whatever fortification we can. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
And thank you to all who are with us on this Zoom. And we look forward to the next set of events by all of the wonderful sponsors. Bye, everybody.
Bye.